My daughter planned a $70,000 wedding and expected me to pay for everything. So I uninvited my wallet and gave her a bigger problem. My daughter Kimberly got engaged last spring. Her fiancé Felix proposed at some fancy restaurant downtown, and she called me before the dessert even came out screaming into the phone that she was getting married. I was happy for her, genuinely happy. I work as a site manager for a paving company. Decent money, not rich money, enough to own a small house, drive a paid-off truck, and put some away every month. I told Kimberly when she got engaged that I'd give her $15,000 for the wedding. That was my budget. She could use it however she wanted. $15,000 is a lot of money for me. Months of saving. I told her this up front so she could plan accordingly. She said thank you, Daddy, and hung up. That was the last time she said thank you. 2 weeks later, Kimberly came to my house with a binder. A full binder with tabs and photos and printed quotes from vendors. She sat down at my kitchen table and opened it like she was presenting a business plan. She showed me the venue she wanted. A vineyard 45 minutes outside the city. The venue rental alone was $22,000. More than my entire budget for the whole wedding. I told her that was too expensive. She told me it was the only venue she wanted. She showed me the caterer, $14,000. The florist, $6,000. The photographer, $5,000. The dress, $8,200 for something she was going to wear once. The total at the bottom of her spreadsheet was just over $70,000. I looked at that number and asked my daughter who she thought was paying for this. She looked at me like I'd asked her a trick question. She said, "You are." I told her I gave her $15,000 and that was my limit. She said $15,000 wouldn't even cover the venue. I told her then she needed a different venue. She closed the binder and told me that every father pays for his daughter's wedding, and this was a tradition, and she'd been planning this since she was a little girl. I told her I understood, but tradition didn't change the number in my bank account. She told me to take out a loan. I told her I wasn't going into debt for a party. She told me it wasn't a party, it was her wedding. I told her a wedding is a party with a ceremony attached, and I wasn't bankrupting myself for either one. She left upset. Rowan called me that night, my son. He said Kimberly was at his apartment crying. He asked what happened. I told him. Rowan said $15,000 sounded more than fair. He said he'd try to talk to her. Whatever Rowan said didn't work because the next day Kimberly called and gave me a list of things she'd cut. She got the total down to $52,000, said she'd compromised. She cut $18,000 and acted like she'd made a sacrifice. I told her my number was still 15. She asked if I even cared about her wedding. I told her I cared about her wedding, but I also cared about keeping my house. She told me Felix's parents were contributing $20,000. I said that was generous of them. She said that meant I only needed to cover the rest. The rest was over $30,000. I told her $30,000 was 2 years of my savings. She said I could sell my truck. I told her my answer was 15 or nothing. She chose option 3. She told me if I wasn't going to support her properly, then she didn't want me at the wedding at all. She uninvited me, her own father, because I wouldn't go broke to give her a vineyard. Felix called me about a week later, respectful. He said he didn't agree with her uninviting me and that he was trying to talk her out of it. He thought the budget was out of control too, but Kimberly wouldn't listen to him either. Then he told me something that made my jaw tight. He said Kimberly had already put deposits down on 3 vendors using her credit card, assuming I was going to reimburse her. She spent money she didn't have because she assumed I'd cover it. About 3 weeks went by. Then the calls started. Not from Kimberly, from the vendors. Apparently Kimberly had given them my number as the secondary contact. The florist called asking to confirm payment arrangements. The caterer called asking about a deposit balance. I told every single one of them I wasn't responsible for any charges and they needed to speak with Kimberly directly. One by one, the vendors started calling Kimberly asking for money she didn't have. A few days later, Rowan told me Kimberly was telling family members I refused to help with the wedding at all. Not that I offered $15,000, that I offered nothing. She was rewriting the whole story. So I called Eugenie, my sister. When she answered, her voice was cold. Not mean exactly, but cold. The kind of tone you use when you've already made up your mind about somebody. She said, "I heard what you did. That girl has been crying to everyone." I asked what Kimberly had told her. She said Kimberly told her I barely offered anything and basically laughed in her face. I told Eugenie I offered $15,000. I told her about the vineyard that cost $22,000 just to rent. About the caterer, the florist, the photographer. I told her Kimberly asked me to sell my truck to pay for it. Eugenie went quiet. Then she said, real slow, "She told me you offered $500 and laughed at her." $500. Kimberly told my own sister I offered $500 and laughed. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not sadness, something harder than that. I realized right then Kimberly wasn't just upset. She was running a campaign. A real, planned out campaign to make me look like the worst father on the planet so the family would pile on me until I caved. Every lie she told was designed to back me into a corner. I asked Eugenie to hold off judging until the family reunion in 2 weeks. Let me show up and tell my side. Eugenie said, "You better have receipts. Right now, half the family thinks you're the worst father alive." I said I had receipts. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table with my phone and went through every text message between me and Kimberly going back to the night she got engaged. I found the one right after the proposal where she said, "Thank you, Daddy. $15,000 is going to help so much." Right there, in her own words. I found the one where she told me Felix's parents were giving $20,000. The one where she said she'd compromised at 52. The one where she said if I wasn't going to support her properly, she didn't want me at the wedding. Every single text told the real story. I screenshotted everyone, saved them into a folder on my phone. That night, Rowan called me again. His voice had that tight sound it gets when he's trying to stay calm and he's not. He said, "Dad, Kimberly called me today. She asked me to walk her down the aisle." That one hit me. My own son being asked to take my place. I asked Rowan what he said. He said, "I told her no. I told her you should be there and she said you made your choice." Dad, she really believes she's the victim here. Like in her head, she's the one who got hurt and you're the one who walked away. 5 days before the reunion, I checked my mailbox on the way back from work and there was a letter in there that made my blood go cold. It was from a collections agency connected to the caterer. According to the letter, I was listed as a co-signer on the catering contract and there was an outstanding balance being forwarded for collection. I read that letter 3 times standing in my driveway. I never signed a catering contract. I never agreed to be on a catering contract. I never even met the caterer. Kimberly had put my name and my home address on a contract and told them I was responsible for paying. I called the caterer directly. quickly, told the woman my name was used without my permission. If there was a signature on that document, it was forged. The line went quiet. The kind of quiet where you can tell someone is staring at their screen trying to figure out what to say. She said she'd pull the original paperwork and escalate it to her manager. I sat there holding my phone and felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Something past anger. My daughter didn't just want my money. She used my name. She put me on the hook for a bill I never agreed to, with a company I never spoke to, for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. Then I picked up my phone and called Kimberly. First time in weeks. She picked up on the third ring and her voice was light, almost cheerful, like we hadn't been in the middle of the worst fight of our lives. Hey Dad, like she was expecting me to call about the weather. I didn't match her energy. I said, did you put my name on a catering contract? She didn't even pause. You were supposed to be paying for it anyway. Just like that, like it was obvious. I told her what she did was fraud. She laughed. Actually laughed. It's not fraud. You're my father. I gripped the phone so tight my hand hurt. I said, if that contract has my signature on it and I didn't sign it, that's a crime, Kimberly. The laughing stopped. She didn't say anything for a second. Then she hung up. My own daughter thought being related to me gave her the right to sign my name on a contract. She thought, you're my father, was a legal defense. An hour later, Felix called. Scared. Not the dangerous kind of scared. The kind where you just realize the person you're about to marry did something you can't explain away. He said Kimberly told him I agreed to be on the contract months ago. He just found out that wasn't true. I told him he needed to go through every piece of wedding paperwork they had. Every contract, every agreement, every form with a signature line. If there was one, there were probably more. The next day, Felix called back. Calmer but tired, like he'd been up all night going through papers. He said, I found 2 more. My stomach turned. The florist had a contract listing me as the guarantor. Same with the photographer. Neither one had a forged signature, which was at least something, but both of them had my full name and address listed as the financially responsible party. Meaning if Kimberly and Felix didn't pay, the vendors would come after me. Felix let out a long breath. I'm pulling the plug on the photographer. We can't afford this. She's going to lose it, but I can't keep pretending this budget makes sense. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from Rowan. No words, just a screenshot. It was a message from the family group chat, the big group thread with cousins and aunts and uncles. Kimberly had posted a long message. She called me emotionally absent. She said I chose money over my only daughter's happiness. She said she had begged me to be part of her special day, and I turned my back on her. She tagged Eugenie. She tagged Rowan. She tagged cousins I hadn't talked to in months. She tagged uncles I grew up with. She wanted every single person in that family to read her version of the story before I had a chance to open my mouth at the reunion. Rowan's follow-up came in right after. She's making her last push before the reunion. She's trying to lock in the narrative before you can say anything. I screenshotted that too. Put it in the folder with everything else. The thank you text, the budget texts, the uninvite text, the vendor contracts, and now this. 2 days before the reunion, I was in my kitchen making coffee around 6 in the evening when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Kimberly's car. She sat in it for a minute before getting out. I watched her walk up the path. Her face was red and puffy. Her eyes were swollen. She wasn't wearing any makeup, which for Kimberly means something is really wrong because that girl doesn't check the mail without mascara on. She sat down on the porch step without me even inviting her and put her face in her hands. The photographer pulled out. Felix canceled them. The florist is threatening to sue me. I don't know what to do. Her voice cracked on that last part, and for the first time in months, I didn't see the bride who wanted a vineyard and an $8,200 dress. I saw my little girl, the one who used to sit on that same porch eating popsicles. Something in my chest pulled hard, and I almost gave in. I sat down next to her on the step. I said, I'm sorry you're going through this. I really am. And I meant it. She looked up at me with those red eyes, and for a second I thought we were going to have a real moment. Then she said, so you'll help? And just like that, the moment was hanging by a thread. I told her I already offered. 15,000. Same number. She shook her head and wiped her face. That's not enough, and you know it. The softness disappeared. Her jaw got tight. If you loved me, you'd figure it out. Other fathers figure it out. That one landed exactly where she wanted it to. Like I hadn't been figuring it out my whole life. Like I hadn't figured out how to raise 2 kids on a site manager's pay. I stood up off that porch step and looked down at her and said, other daughters don't forge their father's name on contracts. Kimberly froze. The kind of freeze where the whole body locks up because something you didn't expect just hit you in the chest. Her mouth opened. What are you talking about? I told her about the catering contract, the collections letter. I told her there were 2 more. The florist, the photographer, 3 contracts, all with my name, all without my permission. She started stammering. That was a mistake. The vendor must have copied your information from a form. I cut her off. The tears dried up like they were never there. The sad little girl on my porch was gone. Her voice went flat and hard. You're going to ruin my wedding over paperwork? Paperwork. She called it paperwork. I looked at her and said, you already ruined your wedding, Kimberly. You ruined it when you decided $70,000 of someone else's money was more important than having your father walk you down the aisle. She walked off the porch. She walked down the path and got in her car. Before she pulled out, she rolled her window down and leaned toward me. Don't come to the reunion. Don't embarrass me in front of the family. That night, Caroline came over. My girlfriend. A year and a half. She'd been quiet through most of this. She's smart like that. She doesn't push. She listens. She came in and sat down next to me on the couch and put her hand on mine. You're doing the right thing, but are you ready for what happens after? I thought about it. After the reunion. After Kimberly hears her own words read back to her in front of everyone she lied to. After the family picks sides. I said, I've been ready since she told me to sell my truck. Caroline squeezed my hand. Then I'll be right next to you. Saturday morning, I put on a clean shirt, grabbed my folder, and picked up Caroline on the way. Rowan met me in Eugenie's driveway. He said Kimberly was already inside telling everyone I'd been harassing her. She was crying. People were hugging her. I told him, good, let her finish. I wanted every lie on the table before I walked in. I walked through the front door and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. 20 people scattered around the living room and kitchen. Cousins I hadn't seen since Christmas. Aunts who sent birthday cards. Uncles I used to watch football with. All of them turned to look at me like I'd crashed a funeral. Kimberly stood up fast. I told you not to come. One of my uncles, the one who used to take me fishing when I was a kid, stepped forward with his arms crossed. Maybe you should go. She's been through enough. I didn't move. I said, I'm not here to fight. right. My daughter has been telling people things that aren't true, and the family deserves to hear both sides. One of the aunts sitting near the kitchen doorway shook her head. Just let it go. It's a wedding. Help your daughter. The whole room felt like a wall pushing against me. Then Eugenie stepped forward. My sister had been standing off to the side near the hallway with her arms crossed. She looked at the room and then at me. Let him talk. The room went quiet. The uncomfortable kind. Eugenie looked right at me. You told me you had receipts, so show them. I opened the folder, but first I pulled out my phone. I walked over to Eugenie and handed it to her with the texts open. The first was from the night Kimberly got engaged. Thank you, Daddy. 15,000 is going to help so much. The second was the one where she told me Felix's parents were giving 20,000. The third was the uninvite. Eugenie held the phone and read the first message out loud, slowly, word by word. Thank you, Daddy. 15,000 is going to help so much. She paused and looked at the room. Then she read the second, then the third. By the time she finished the third, the air in the room had changed, like watching the tide go out. The sympathy that had been flooding toward Kimberly was pulling back. One of the aunts who had been sitting right next to Kimberly leaned forward and said, she told us you offered nothing. I nodded. I know what she told you. Now you're seeing what she told me. Kimberly stood up. Her face was tight and red. Those texts are out of context. You don't know what was happening when I sent those. He's twisting everything. I didn't argue. I reached into the folder and pulled out the printed copies of the vendor contracts, the ones Felix found, the caterer, the florist, the photographer. 3 contracts for a wedding I was uninvited from, all with my full name and address as the person financially responsible if the bills didn't get paid. I held them up. Is this out of context too? I handed them to Eugenie. She looked at the first, then the second, then the third. Her face went hard. She looked straight at Kimberly. Kimberly, did you put your father's name on these? Kimberly didn't answer. She just stood there with her mouth open. The uncle who had told me to leave 5 minutes ago sat down on the arm of a chair with his hands in his lap. One of the aunts who had been sitting right next to Kimberly slowly got up and moved to the other side of the room like she didn't want to be associated with what she was hearing. The mood in that room had flipped so completely it felt like a different house than the one I walked into 3 minutes ago. Nobody was looking at me like I was the villain anymore. They were looking at Kimberly and waiting for her to explain, but Kimberly didn't explain. She did what Kimberly always does when she's backed into a corner. She pushed forward. She grabbed her purse from the couch and dug through it and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She walked toward me with her chin up. Fine. If you want to be involved so badly, then be involved. Sign this. I took it and unfolded it. A personal loan agreement, typed up on some template she must have found online. My full name as the lender, hers as the borrower. $32,000. Payable over 5 years. Monthly payments, and at the bottom, a late penalty clause. My daughter brought a loan agreement to a family reunion. She didn't come to apologize. She came with a folded up contract in her purse ready to close a deal. I looked at Kimberly and said loud enough for everyone to hear, I want everyone to understand what's on this paper. I read it out loud. Every word. 32,000. 5 years of monthly payments. A late penalty clause if I missed one. My daughter drew up a contract to charge her own father interest on money for a wedding she uninvited him from. The aunt who had told me to just let it go 5 minutes earlier put her hand over her mouth. Eugenie said, Kimberly, tell me this is a joke. Kimberly didn't flinch. She lifted her chin. It's not a joke. Every financial advisor says to put agreements in writing. I'm being responsible. Responsible. That was the word she used. I folded the paper, slow, crease by crease, and set it down on the coffee table. Then I looked at my daughter and said, you uninvited me from your wedding because I wouldn't go into debt. You told this entire family I abandoned you. You put my name on contracts I never agreed to. And now you're handing me a loan agreement at a family reunion. At what point did you stop seeing me as your father and start seeing me as a bank? Kimberly's mouth opened. Her lips parted and her jaw dropped and she stood there with nothing coming out. No comeback. No excuse. Just silence. Then Rowan stepped forward from the back corner. He walked toward the center of the room and looked at his sister. His voice was calm, but you could hear the weight behind it. Kimberly, I love you, but this is wrong. Dad offered you $15,000. That's more than a lot of people get. You turned it into a war because it wasn't enough. You need to hear yourself right now. Kimberly turned to him so fast her hair swung across her face. You always take his side. Rowan didn't step back. He shook his head slow. I'm not taking a side. I'm telling you the truth and you're treating it like an attack. Kimberly looked around the room. I watched her eyes move from face to face, searching for someone, anyone, who was still on her side. The aunts who had been hugging her when I walked in were looking at the floor. The uncle who told me to leave was leaning against the far wall staring at nothing. The cousins were sitting on chairs and standing in doorways, and not one of them would meet her eyes. 10 minutes ago, every person in that room had been ready to throw me out. Now not a single one of them could look at my daughter. She pointed at me, hands shaking. You did this. You turned everyone against me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't turn anyone against you. I just stopped letting you turn them against me. I picked up the folder. I looked at the room. My offer of $15,000 still stands. My door is open, but I will not be bullied, and I will not be lied about. Then I looked at Kimberly. I love you. I have always loved you, but I will not go broke to prove it. Kimberly sat down on the couch, slow, like all the air had gone out of her at once. For the first time in months, my daughter had nothing to say. I turned and walked toward the front door. I didn't look back. Caroline was waiting on the porch swing. She stood up and put her hand on my arm. We walked down the steps together. I got in my truck. The folder was on the